The ink on the mating contract was still wet when Elara pressed the lit candle to its corner. She could smell the goatskin parchment beginning to curl, that sharp tang of singed animal hide mixing with the beeswax dripping onto her knuckles. The wax burned. She did not flinch. 300 wolves watched from the stone amphitheater below the altar steps, and not one of them breathed. The contract had taken 4 months to negotiate, 4 months of border treaties and grain tariffs and bloodline verification, all reduced to a single sheet that would bind the Ashenmoor pack to the Iron Veil Alliance through her body, through her womb, through 20 years of producing heirs for a man she had never met and never wanted, and now it burned in her fingers, while the Alpha King of Ashenmoor stood 6 feet away, close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his amber eyes, close enough that the smoke drifted between them like a veil. But that moment, that impossible moment on the altar steps, didn't begin there. It began 3 days earlier in the tile room beneath the Iron Veil pack house, where Elara spent her nights cataloguing the dead. She was the pack mortician's assistant, had been since she was 14, when the old wolf, Martis, had found her sleeping behind the crematorium, because it was the only warm place no one checked. He had not asked questions. He had handed her a pair of latex gloves and a clipboard, and told her that the dead deserved accurate records even if the living did not care. For 9 years she had weighed organs, noted scars, recorded cause of death in her careful handwriting. She knew the exact weight of a wolf's liver. She knew how long it took for rigor mortis to set in a shifted body versus a human one. She knew the particular smell of a wolf who had died from silver poisoning, that strange metallic sweetness like pennies left in orange juice. The tile room was cold. It was always cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a frequency that had given her a permanent tension knot behind her left eye, and the ventilation system recycled air that tasted of formaldehyde and the lemon disinfectant Mathis ordered in bulk from a human janitorial supply company. Elara had once calculated that she spent more hours per week with the dead than with the living. The dead were better company. They did not spit in her food. They did not trip her on the packhouse stairs. They did not whisper Omega trash when she walked past the training yard, carrying her lunch, a lunch she ate alone on the back steps of the crematorium, because the dining hall had an unspoken seating chart, and her place was not on it. Her wolf was silent, had been silent her entire life. Among the Iron Veil pack, a wolf who could not shift was not a wolf at all. She was a body without a soul, a vessel without purpose. Pack Alpha Renard had said as much at her 16th birthday, the only birthday anyone had acknowledged, and only because it was the cutoff. If your wolf did not manifest by 16, you were classified as a dud, a biological dead end. Renard had stamped her file himself. She had watched him do it from across his desk, the red ink still glistening on the word nullified. Elara was 23 now. The stamp had dried long ago. But 3 days before the burning, something changed. She was mid-autopsy on a rogue wolf who had been caught crossing Iron Veil's southern border. Male, early 30s, cause of death listed as resistance during capture, which Elara knew was a polite way of saying the border patrol had beaten him until his skull fractured. She had seen it before. She did not react anymore. She made her incision along the sternum. Standard Y-cut. The fluorescent light flickered, once the way it always did when the packhouse above her ran too many appliances during dinner hour. Her scalpel was steady. It was always steady. Martis said she had the best hands he had ever trained, and Martis didn't give compliments the way most people gave compliments. He said it once, 7 years ago, and never repeated it, which meant he meant it. The rogue wolf's chest cavity opened, and Ilara's hand stopped. There was a mark on the inside of his ribcage. Not a wound, not a disease. A brand burned into the bone itself, in a symbol she had only seen once before, in an old textbook Martis kept locked in his bottom drawer. A crescent moon pierced by 3 vertical lines, the mark of the Ashenmoor bloodline. The Ashenmoor pack was not simply another pack. It was the seat of the Wolf Throne, the Alpha King's territory. And for the past 2 years, tensions between Iron Vale and Ashenmoor had been escalating toward war. The mating contract, the one Ilara had heard whispered about in the halls above her, was supposed to prevent that war. Pack Alpha Renard's eldest daughter, Seraphine, would be mated to the Alpha King. Peace would be bought with a beautiful body and a fertile womb. Standard politics, standard currency, women as treaty paper. Ilara stared at the brand on the dead wolf's ribs and felt something she had not felt in years. A vibration, low beneath her sternum. Not a sound. A sensation like a tuning fork struck against her bones. She told no one. She photographed the brand, filed the autopsy report with the brand omitted, and went back to her cold room beneath the pack house, where her mattress sat on the concrete floor beside a stack of library books she had borrowed, and never returned because the librarian had stopped tracking her account years ago. She pressed her palm flat against her own sternum and felt it again. That hum, that resonance, like something waking up after a very long sleep. 2 days before the burning, the Ashenmoor delegation arrived. Ilara was not supposed to be anywhere near the welcome procession. Her duties kept her underground, literally in the basement morgue with its humming lights and its lemon-scented death. But Martis had sent her upstairs to collect a shipment of embalming fluid that had been delivered to the wrong entrance, and the wrong entrance happened to be the east courtyard, and the east courtyard happened to be directly adjacent to the main gates. She heard them before she saw them. The Iron Vale wolves who lined the greeting corridor went silent, which was notable because wolves were never silent. There was always the shuffle of weight, the clearing of throats, the low muttering of rank and hierarchy, being negotiated through posture. But this silence was different. It was the silence of prey animals who had just scented something so far above them on the food chain that their bodies defaulted to invisibility as a survival mechanism. Ilara pressed herself against the courtyard wall, the box of embalming fluid balanced against her hip, and looked through the iron gate. The Alpha King of Ashenmoor did not walk through the gate. He occupied it. He was the largest wolf she had ever seen in human form, broad enough that his shoulders nearly brushed both sides of the corridor entrance, tall enough that the torchlight caught the top of his dark hair and turned it the color of a bruise. His jaw was heavy and angular, shadowed by a beard that was not groomed for fashion, but simply existed because he had not bothered to remove it. There was a scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw, not clean, not surgical, but ragged, as if something with claws had tried to open his face, and he had simply healed around the damage and moved on. His eyes were amber, not brown with gold flecks, not hazel, amber, the color of pine resin held up to sunlight, the color of old honey, and they were scanning the courtyard with the slow, methodical attention of a predator who catalogued threats the way Ilara catalogued the dead, thoroughly, without emotion. His name was Kyle Ashenmoor. She knew this the way everyone knew it, the way you knew the name of a storm system approaching your coast. She should have looked away. She should have gone back inside, delivered the embalming fluid, returned to her tile room and her clipboard and her dead. That was her world. That was where she was allowed to exist. But the hum in her sternum detonated. It went from a vibration to a roar in the space of a single heartbeat, and Alara's vision blurred, her fingers losing grip on the box, the glass bottles inside clinking together, and one of them cracked, and the smell of formaldehyde erupted into the air, sharp and acrid and completely wrong for a welcome procession, and every wolf in the courtyard turned to look at her, including him. Cale Ashenmore's amber eyes locked onto her with the precision of a rifle scope, and something behind those eyes shifted. His nostrils flared, his jaw tightened. The two warriors flanking him, both enormous men in black tactical gear, stepped forward instinctively, but the Alpha King raised one hand, a single gesture, and they stopped as if they had hit a wall. He inhaled again. Deeper, his eyes never leaving hers, and Alara felt the bond snap into place, like a bone being set after a fracture. That same sickening, necessary click, something broken, suddenly made right in a way that hurt as much as it healed. Mate. The word came from somewhere inside her she did not recognize. Not her mind, not her silent wolf. Somewhere deeper, somewhere older. Mate. Cale Ashenmore took one step toward her, then another. The entire courtyard was still frozen, hundreds of wolves who did not understand what they were witnessing, who saw only their Alpha King walking toward a pale, thin woman in a stained mortician's apron, who smelled of formaldehyde and dead tissue and was clutching a broken box of embalming fluid. "What is your name?" His voice was not a question. It was low and rough, the kind of voice that came from a chest cavity, large enough to resonate like a drum, and it didn't rise at the end, because Cale Ashenmore had not asked a question in so long that his vocal cords had forgotten the inflection. Alara's mouth opened, closed, her hands were shaking. The cracked bottle was leaking into the box and down her hip, and the formaldehyde was soaking into her apron, and she could not think past the roaring in her chest. "Alara," she said, "I work in the morgue." Something crossed his face, not a smile, not warmth, something more fundamental, like watching a key turn in a lock. He inhaled again, and this time his eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, the amber had darkened to something closer to molten gold. "You smell like death and white cedar," he said. "And underneath that, rain. You smell like rain before it hits the ground." She did not know what to say to that. No one had ever told her what she smelled like. No one had ever stood close enough to find out. Pack Alpha Renard appeared at the courtyard entrance, his smile already assembled, his hand already extended. "Alpha King, welcome to Ironvale. I see you have met one of our support staff. Alara, perhaps you should return to your duties." The dismissal was practiced, effortless, the kind of redirection that made Alara invisible in a single sentence, collapsing her back into the background where she belonged. But Cale had not looked at Renard, had not acknowledged his hand, had not moved his gaze from Alara's face. "She stays," the Alpha King said. "I beg your pardon." "Did I stutter, Renard?" Again, not a question. The silence that followed was the kind that preceded either a diplomatic incident or a war. Renard's smile did not falter, because he was a politician before he was an alpha, and politicians could hold a smile through a knife wound. But his eyes went cold. "Of course," Renard said, "whatever the Alpha King prefers." Alara wanted to run. Every survival instinct she had cultivated over 23 years of being small and quiet and forgettable was screaming at her to disappear, to slide back into the basement and their fluorescent hum and the dead who asked nothing of her. But Cale Ashenmore was looking at her like she was the only living thing in the courtyard, and the hum in her sternum had settled into something warm and steady like a second heartbeat, and her traitorous body would not move. He extended his hand, not to shake, palm up, an offering. "Walk with me," he said. She looked at his hand. It was enormous, scarred across the knuckles. The nails were trimmed short, practical, not decorative. There was a callus on the edge of his palm that came from gripping a weapon for so long that the skin had simply given up and armored itself. Elara set the broken box of embalming fluid on the ground. She pulled off her stained apron and folded it with the automatic neatness of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. She placed it on top of the box. Then she took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, and the warmth was immediate, not a temperature but a frequency, a vibration that matched the one in her sternum so precisely that her vision went sharp, hyper-focused, and for one disorienting second she could smell everything. The courtyard gravel heated by the afternoon sun, the pine sap from the tree line beyond the wall, the leather of Kyle's jacket worn soft at the elbows, the fear sweat of every wolf who was watching them. And beneath it all, him. Wood smoke and iron and something dark and green like moss growing over stone. A scent so specific, so layered, that she knew she would be able to find him in a crowd of 10,000 with her eyes closed. He led her through the courtyard as if the delegation, the diplomats, the 4 months of negotiated peace did not exist. Renard watched them go. His smile held, but his left hand, the one hidden behind his back, was clenched into a fist so tight that his knuckles cracked. The walk lasted 20 minutes. Kyle said nothing for the first 10. He simply walked beside her, his pace slowed to match hers, his hand still holding hers with a grip that was firm but not crushing. They passed through the eastern gardens, which Elara had never been invited to use, but knew existed, because she occasionally carried bodies that had been found there, wolves who had dueled illegally and lost. The garden was overgrown and beautiful, in the way neglected things sometimes are. Wisteria had colonized the stone archways and was dripping purple flowers onto the path, and the smell was thick and sweet and alive, so different from her tile room that Elara felt disoriented by it. "You do not have a wolf," Kyle said. Not accusatory, observational, like he was reading data from a chart. "No. You have been told you do not have a wolf. My classification is nullified. No manifestation by 16. Your classification is wrong." She stopped walking. He stopped with her, turning to face her with the patience of someone who was accustomed to waiting for important things and had never once been in a hurry for the unimportant ones. "My wolf has never spoken," Elara said. I have never shifted. I cannot hear the pack link. I am null." "Your wolf," Kyle said, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle, which was alarming in a man of his size and reputation, "is not absent. She is dormant. There is a difference. How would you know that?" "Because my wolf recognized her. He has been silent for 6 years, since my mother died. I have not heard him speak since the day I buried her. And when you dropped that box in the courtyard, he said one word. Mate. He has not shut up since." The warmth in Elara's sternum pulsed, and for a fraction of a second she heard it. Not words, not language. A sound deep and resonant, like the low note of a cello, a sound that came from inside her own body, but was not her own. Her wolf. Dreaming. Stirring. "That is not possible," she whispered. "I am not in the habit of lying," Kyle said. "It takes too long." That surprised a breath out of her that was almost, not quite, a laugh, and Kyle's expression shifted at the sound, something cracking open behind his amber eyes, something vulnerable and quickly sealed like a glimpse through a door before it shut. The mating contract, Ilara said, because she had to, because the reality of it sat between them like a wall. You are here to mate Seraphine, Renard's daughter. The alliance depends on it. I am aware of what I am here to do. Then this cannot happen. I am an Omega. I am nullified. I am no one. You are not no one. You are mine. The possessiveness in that word should have frightened her. Coming from any other alpha, it would have. She had spent her life being owned by a pack that did not want her being claimed as property, with no value being categorized and stamped and filed away. Ownership had only ever meant erasure. But when Kyle said mine, the word landed differently. It landed like a hand pressed over a wound, like a door locked against the cold. It landed like protection, not possession. She did not trust it. She had survived too long to trust anything that felt good. You do not know me, she said. I know you smell like rain and white cedar. I know you have steady hands. I know my wolf, who has been dead for 6 years, came alive when he found yours. That is enough for now. The rest I will learn. She pulled her hand from his. The loss of contact was physical, a cold rush where warmth had been, and she saw Kyle's jaw tighten, but he did not reach for her again. He let her go. I need to return to work, she said. There is a body waiting for autopsy. Then go. She turned, took 2 steps. Ilara. She stopped. Who gave you that scar behind your ear? Her hand went to it involuntarily. The scar was small, barely an inch long, hidden by her hair. She had gotten it when she was 16, the day after her nullification, when Renard's son Damon had shoved her into the courtyard wall for walking too slowly in front of him. The stone had split her skin. She had cleaned it herself with iodine, stolen from the morgue supplies. No one important? She said. Describe them. It does not matter. It matters to me. She did not answer. She walked back to the morgue down the stairs, past the buzzing lights, into the cold room, where the dead rogue wolf still lay open on her table. She pulled on fresh gloves. She picked up her scalpel. Her hands, for the first time in 9 years, were not steady. That night, Seraphine came to find her. Renard's eldest daughter was everything Ilara was not, tall, curved, copper-haired, with the kind of face that made other wolves stare, and then look away, because prolonged eye contact with a high-ranking female was a challenge. She smelled of jasmine and something sharp like crushed green stems, and she moved through the world with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been told no. She found Ilara in the crematorium, where Ilara was incinerating the rogue wolf's remains per standard protocol. The furnace roared behind its iron door, the heat making the small room waver like a mirage. You touched the Alpha King, Seraphine said. He took my hand. Do not pass words with me. You are a null. You are a corpse handler. And today, you walked through the Eastern Gardens with the most powerful wolf on the continent like you had the right. I did not ask for it. Seraphine studied her. There was something in her expression that Ilara expected to be contempt, but was not. It was closer to calculation, closer to fear. My father has spent 4 months building this alliance, Seraphine said. Iron Vale cannot survive without Ashenmoor's protection. The northern rogues are organizing. We do not have the military strength to hold our borders alone. This mating contract is not about me. It is not about romance or bonds or fated nonsense. It is about the survival of every wolf in this pack. I understand that. Do you? Because what happened today in that courtyard could destroy it all. If the Alpha King becomes distracted, if he starts making demands about some Omega mortician instead of signing the contract. My father will not allow it. He cannot allow it. Ilara closed the furnace door. The metal handle was hot through her glove. I am not trying to take anything from you, she said, quietly. Seraphine was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped, and the political sharpness had gone out of it. I know, she said. I have met him, the Alpha King, briefly during the formal introduction tonight. He looked through me like I was made of glass. Not with cruelty. With nothing. Complete absence. He looked at me the way you look at a document you are required to sign but have no interest in reading. She paused. Her fingers found the doorframe and gripped it. No man has ever looked at me that way, she said. I am not accustomed to it. And there it was. Beneath the politics and the anger and the copper hair and the jasmine perfume, a woman who had been told her entire life that her value was her beauty and her bloodline, discovering in a single glance that neither mattered to the one person they were supposed to matter to most. Ilara recognized the shape of that wound. It was different from hers, but it was the same species. Seraphine, do not presume to comfort me. I am telling you this so you understand what is at stake. This contract will be signed. My father will ensure it. And whatever you think you felt today will be made irrelevant. She left. The door swung shut. The furnace hummed. Ilara stood in the heat and thought about the brand on the dead rogue wolf's ribcage, the crescent moon and 3 lines, the Ashenmoor bloodline mark. She had not told anyone. She had omitted it from the report, because the mark on the rogue wolf's ribs was identical to a birthmark on her own left hip, a mark she had been born with, a mark she had hidden her entire life because Martis, the old mortician, had seen it once when she was 15 and had gone so pale that his coffee cup shattered on the tile floor. He had gripped her shoulders and said, "Never show this to anyone, especially not Renard. Promise me." She had promised. She had never asked why. Martis was the only person who had ever shown her kindness, and she repaid kindness with obedience. It was the only currency she had. But now, the hum in her sternum, the dormant wolf, the Alpha King's hand, warm and scarred, and offered palm up like a question he already knew the answer to. Things were shifting, tectonic, unstoppable. And Ilara, who had spent her entire life in a cold room with the dead, was not prepared for what it felt like to be dragged into the land of the living. The next day was the formal contract ceremony rehearsal, and Ilara was supposed to be nowhere near it. She was in the morgue as always, but Martis did not come in for his morning shift. This was unusual. In 9 years, Martis had missed exactly 2 shifts, both for a dental surgery that required general anesthesia, and even then he had called ahead. By noon, she went looking for him. She found him in his quarters above the crematorium, sitting in his reading chair, which was a battered leather recliner that smelled of pipe tobacco and the specific, musty sweetness of old medical textbooks. He was holding a glass of whiskey. It was noon. Martis did not drink before 6. These were the kinds of details that told Ilara something was very wrong. "They are transferring you," Martis said without looking up. "Transferring me where?" "Away. Renard came to see me this morning. First time in 11 years he has set foot in this building. He wants you reassigned. Kitchen detail. But not here. At the Eastern Outpost, 60 miles from the pack house." The Eastern Outpost was a border monitoring station, staffed by 4 wolves and surrounded by nothing but scrub pine and mud. Ilara had processed a body from there once a wolf who had died of exposure after the heating system failed. It had taken 3 days for anyone to notice he was missing. When? She asked. Tomorrow morning, before the contract signing. He is removing me so the Alpha King cannot find me. Yes. Can he do that? He is Pack Alpha Ilara. He can do whatever he wants. She sat down on the edge of Mattis's cot, the one he kept in his quarters for nights when he was too tired to walk home. The mattress was thin and smelled of cedar shavings because Mattis kept cedar blocks in all his drawers to repel moths. The brand, she said. On the rogue wolf, the Ashenmoor mark. Mattis took a long drink. You recognized it, she continued. 9 years ago you saw my birthmark, and you knew what it meant. You have known this entire time. I have known that you carry a mark that should not exist on a wolf in Iron Vale, Mattis said carefully. I have known that if Renard ever saw it, you would disappear. Not to an outpost. Permanently. Why? Because your mother was not from Iron Vale. She was Ashenmoor. She was smuggled here 24 years ago, pregnant, terrified, and dying. I delivered you in this very room. On that table where you cut open corpses every morning. The fluorescent light buzzed. Ilara's hands pressed flat against her thighs. My mother. Her name was Ilara. She was a healer in the Ashenmoor royal household. She carried the king's bloodline, not as a mate, but as a cousin. A blood relation to the throne. She fled because she discovered something she would not tell me about. Why Ashenmoor wolves were being sent into Iron Vale territory as rogues. She wanted to warn someone. Anyone. She died 4 hours after you were born. Hemorrhage. I could not stop it. And Renard? Renard knows you are an orphan. He does not know what you are. If he did, you would be a bargaining chip at best, and a threat to be eliminated at worst. I have kept you invisible for 23 years. The morgue was the safest place. No one comes here. No one cares about the dead. Ilara closed her eyes. The hum in her sternum was louder now. Not a cello anymore. Something bigger. An orchestra, warming up each instrument, finding its note. The Alpha King recognized me, she said. Yes. His wolf knew. The blood knows. It always knows. I had hoped you might go your entire life without an Ashenmoor wolf coming close enough to scent you. That was naive. I apologize. You protected me. I hid you. There is a difference. Protection would have been getting you out. I was too afraid. Too comfortable. I told myself you were safe, as long as you stayed small. He looked at her then, and his eyes were wet, and she realized she had never seen Mattis cry. Not once. Not over any of the hundreds of bodies they had processed together. You were never meant to be small, Ilara. She reached over and took his glass. She drank the remaining whiskey. It burned like formaldehyde, tasted chemical and wrong, but she needed the heat. I am not going to the eastern outpost, she said. No, Mattis agreed. I did not think you would. That afternoon, Ilara did 3 things. First, she went to the archive room beneath the packhouse library, a room she had access to because dead wolves sometimes needed their records pulled for family notification, and she was the one who pulled them. She found her mother's file. It was thin. A single page. Name Ilara. Status deceased. Cause childbirth complications. Pack of origin unknown. The lie was right there in bureaucratic black and white. Pack of origin unknown. Someone had written that. Someone had filed it. Someone had made Ilara's mother disappear into a single page. Second, she found the rogue wolf's personal effects in the evidence lockup, also in the basement, also accessible to her because the dead wolf's belongings were technically morgue inventory until claimed. Among them was a leather cord necklace holding a small iron pendant. The pendant was the same mark. Crescent moon. 3 lines. She put it in her pocket. Third, she went to the Eastern Gardens where she knew Kyle walked in the late afternoon because she had watched him from the morgue's ground-level window, the small one that looked out onto the garden path at ankle height. She had watched him walk alone, his guards trailing 20 feet behind his pace, slow and measured his head, occasionally tilting as if listening for something only he could hear. She was waiting by the wisteria arch when he appeared. He did not seem surprised to see her. He stopped. His guard stopped behind him. He looked at her, and the amber of his eyes caught the late sun, and the hum in her chest became a chord. "They are sending me away tomorrow," she said. "Before the signing. I know. You know. I have had scouts monitoring the packhouse communications since I arrived. Standard precaution in hostile territory. Renard's order was intercepted an hour after he issued it. This is not hostile territory. You are here for a peace negotiation. Any place where my mate is being threatened is hostile territory." The word mate from his mouth made her stomach clench, not with fear, but with something more dangerous. Want, a feeling she had spent her entire life pruning back like an invasive vine, because wanting things was a luxury she could not afford. "I have to tell you something," she said. She pulled the iron pendant from her pocket and held it out. Kyle's expression did not change, but his hand went still at his side, the fingers curling once, and then straightening. "Where did you get that?" "The rogue wolf your delegation caught at the southern border. He is dead. I performed his autopsy. He had this mark branded onto his ribs, and I have the same mark, not branded, born with it, on my left hip. Show me. We are in a garden. Show me." She looked at the guards. Kyle did not turn around. "Leave," he said. They left. Ilara pulled the hem of her shirt up on the left side and pushed the waistband of her trousers down 2 inches. The birthmark was there as it had always been. Crescent moon. 3 lines, darker than her surrounding skin, slightly raised like a scar that had never been a wound. Kyle knelt. The Alpha King of Ashenmoor, the most feared wolf on the continent, knelt in the dirt of an overgrown garden to look at a birthmark on a mortician's hip. He was so close she could feel his breath on her skin, warm and steady, and his scent hit her unfiltered wood smoke and iron, and that deep green moss smell, and the hum in her chest became so loud she was sure he could hear it. His fingers hovered over the mark. Did not touch. Hovered. "This is the seal of the Ashenmoor Moon Court," he said. "It appears on the skin of blood-born wolves, those who carry the original bloodline, not through mating, through birth. There are 7 living wolves with this mark. I am one of them." He looked up at her. From his knees, the Alpha King looking up. "You are not an Omega Ilara. You are not nullified. You are blood-born Ashenmoor, which means your wolf was not absent." She was sealed, suppressed, likely by someone who did not want you found. "My mother. What was her name?" "Ilara." Something moved across his face. Recognition. Pain. "Ilara was my mother's closest friend," he said quietly. "She disappeared 24 years ago. My mother searched for her for years. She never stopped. It is what killed her in the end. Not the disease. The grief of never knowing." He rose to his feet. His hands came up to her face, not touching, bracketing his palms inches from her cheeks. "You are the daughter of Ilara Ashenmore. You carry the Moon Court seal. Your wolf has been sealed since birth, probably by your mother, to hide you. And you have been living in a basement, cutting open corpses for a pack that stamps humans like documents." His voice was controlled, but barely. She could hear the seams straining. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said, "and I need you to answer honestly." "Yes." "The scar behind your ear. Who?" "Renard's son. Damon." "The other scars, your wrists, your shoulders. I saw them yesterday. Fingerprint bruises, old ones, layered. Who? Various. Pack members. It is standard treatment for a null. It is not standard. It is not treatment. It is abuse. In Iron Veil, it is both." His hands lowered. He stepped back. She could see him reassembling himself, pulling the control back over whatever was raging underneath, and she understood in that moment that Cale Ashenmore's coldness was not cruelty. It was containment. He was a man who felt so much that he had built walls around every emotion, because the alternative was leveling buildings. "The contract signing is tomorrow evening," he said. "Seraphine will be presented. I am expected to sign." "I know. I will not sign." "You must. Iron Veil needs the alliance. Your people need peace. My people need their queen, and their queen is standing in front of me, smelling like rain and wearing a dead man's pendant." Kyle. It was the first time she had said his name. It stopped him mid-breath. The amber of his eyes flared, and she saw it. Then the wolf behind the man, pressing forward, straining against whatever leash Kyle kept it on. "Do not sign it for me," she said. "Do not start a war for me. I am not worth that. You do not get to decide your worth to me. And you do not get to decide the fate of 2 packs based on a scent in a courtyard. It is not a scent. It is a bond. It is the most sacred thing in our world. Your world, not mine. I have no wolf sealed or otherwise. I have no pack. I have no claim to anything. If you reject this contract, Renard will see it as an act of war. People will die. People are already dying. The rogues crossing your southern border are Ashenmore wolves, my wolves. Someone has been smuggling them into Iron Veil territory for years, getting them killed and sending the bodies back unmarked. Your dead rogue was not a stranger. He was a scout I sent to find out who has been murdering my people. And he was killed by Iron Veil Border Patrol on Renard's standing orders." The garden was quiet. The wisteria swayed. "Renard has been killing Ashenmore wolves," Ilara said slowly. "For at least 5 years. Possibly longer. The peace negotiation is not about peace. It is about buying time while he continues destabilizing my borders. The mating contract is a leash designed to bind me politically while his operations continue. Seraphine is not a bride. She is a spy. And you were supposed to be dead 23 years ago. The fact that you survived is either a miracle or someone else's plan. Mathis, the old mortician. He delivered me. He hid me. He has been protecting me since birth. Then he is the only honorable wolf in this pack, and when this is over, I will ensure he is rewarded." "When what is over?" Kyle looked at her. The containment cracked just for a moment, and underneath it was not rage but something worse. Hope. The terrified, fragile hope of a man who had stopped believing he would ever find something he had been searching for his entire life. "Tomorrow evening," he said. "At the contract signing. Stay close. I need you to trust me. I do not trust anyone." then distrust me from a shorter distance. That almost laugh again, startled out of her like a bird flushed from cover. And again that crack in his expression, that glimpse through the door. Elara, yes. After tomorrow, you will never sleep in a basement again. That is not a promise. It is a fact. He turned and walked back toward the pack house, and his guards materialized from the shadows to flank him, and Elara stood in the garden with the iron pendant in her pocket and the hum in her chest building toward something she could no longer ignore. That night, Renard summoned her. Not to his office. To the small room behind the kitchen, the one used for disciplining lower-ranked wolves, the one that smelled of bleach and copper, because both were regularly needed there. Elara knew the room well. She had been summoned to it 4 times in 9 years, each time for some perceived infraction that boiled down to existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Renard was sitting in a folding chair. He was a lean man, sharp-featured with the coloring of a winter fox, silver-red hair, and pale eyes that had the clarity and warmth of ice. He was not physically imposing. He did not need to be. His power operated through systems, through bureaucracy, through the careful cultivation of debts and fears. Damon stood behind him. Renard's son was taller, heavier with his mother's dark coloring and his father's cold eyes. He was the one who had given Elara the scar behind her ear. He was also the one who had held her down in the training yard when she was 17, while 2 other wolves poured ice water over her head because someone had told him it was funny, and he had the kind of mind that confused cruelty with comedy. But tonight, Damon was quiet. He stood with his arms crossed, and his jaw working as if chewing on something he could not swallow, and his eyes kept flicking to his father, and then away. And there was something in his posture that Elara had never seen before. Discomfort. Not moral discomfort. The strategic kind. The kind that came from suspecting you were on the wrong side of a calculation. You spoke with the Alpha King today, Renard said. He spoke with me. Do not be clever. You are being transferred to the eastern outpost at dawn. You will remain there until the Alpha King's delegation has departed. You will have no contact with any Ashenmoor wolves. This is not negotiable. What if the Alpha King asks for me? He will not. He is here for a political alliance, not for a basement null who smells of embalming fluid. Whatever he felt in the courtyard was a temporary confusion. Mate bonds are chemical. They can be overridden by distance and time. You will be forgotten within a week. Is that what happened with your mate? Your first mate. The silence was absolute. Damon's arms uncrossed. Renard's jaw tightened. Every wolf in Ironvale knew the story, though no one spoke it aloud. Renard's fated mate had not been Seraphine's mother. His fated mate had been a low-ranking wolf from a minor pack, a woman named Thea, and he had rejected the bond to marry for political advantage instead. Thea had left Ironvale. Some said she died, some said she went rogue. Renard never spoke of her. That, Renard said softly, is not your business. You rejected your bond for an alliance, and you want me to believe the Alpha King will simply do the same. Renard stood. The chair scraped against the concrete floor, a sound that made the back of Elara's neck prickle. I rejected my bond because bonds are biological accidents. They are not sacred. They are not destiny. They are a chemical reaction that nature uses to increase the chances of strong offspring. I made a choice based on rational calculation, and that choice gave me a pack, an alliance, and a legacy. Thea would have given me nothing. He stepped closer. He was shorter than Kyle by nearly a foot, but in this small room, proximity replaced size. You will go to the eastern outpost. You will stay there. And if you attempt to contact the Alpha King or interfere with the signing in any way, I will not transfer you. I will bury you. Mathis will perform the autopsy. He will write natural causes on the report. And the world will continue as if you never existed, which functionally is already the case. He left. Damon followed. But at the door, Damon paused. He looked back at her, and for a single strange moment, his expression was not cruel. It was something closer to pity, not the performative kind, the involuntary kind, the kind that leaks through before you can stop it. For what it is worth, he said quietly. I told him not to threaten you. I told him it was unnecessary. Then he was gone, and Elara was alone in the bleach and copper room, and she understood that she had approximately 12 hours before her life either changed or ended, and possibly both. She did not go to the eastern outpost at dawn. She went to the contract signing. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall, Ironvale's most impressive architectural achievement, a vaulted stone chamber lit by 100 beeswax candles in iron chandeliers. The altar stood at the far end, raised on 3 stone steps, a flat granite slab, where generations of mating contracts had been signed and sealed with blood. The candles threw warm, shifting light across the assembled wolves, 300 of them in their formal attire, seated in concentric semicircles around the altar. Seraphine stood to the left of the altar in a white dress that made her copper hair blaze. She was beautiful, objectively, irrefutably beautiful, and she stood with her chin raised and her shoulders back, and only someone who had spoken with her in a crematorium would know that her hands, hidden in the folds of her dress, were trembling. Kyle stood to the right. Black. All black. Not formal wear, but something closer to battle, dress a long coat that did not quite hide the breadth of his shoulders, boots that had seen mud and blood and long roads. He looked like what he was, a king who had come to negotiate, but was prepared for the negotiation to fail. Renard stood between them, the contract on the altar before him, the ceremonial pen in its holder, the blood bowl ready for the sealing bite. He was smiling. He was always smiling. Elara entered through the servants' corridor, a narrow passage behind the eastern wall that opened into the hall behind the last row of seats. She was wearing her only clean clothes, a pair of dark trousers, and a grey shirt that Mattis had given her 3 years ago for a funeral she had to attend. She had no formal dress. She had no jewelry. She had the iron pendant on its leather cord around her neck, hidden beneath her collar. She moved along the back wall. No one looked at her. Omegas and nulls were background noise in Ironvale, as visible as the stones in the floor. She positioned herself near the eastern column, close enough to see the altar, far enough to remain invisible. Renard began the ceremony. His voice carried well in the vaulted space, smooth and practiced, the voice of a man who had spent decades turning words into weapons. He spoke of the long friendship between Ironvale and Ashenmoor, which was a lie. He spoke of the mutual desire for peace, which was a strategic half-truth. He spoke of the sacred bond of mating, and Elara watched Kyle's jaw tighten at the word, sacred, from the mouth of a man who had called bonds biological accidents less than 12 hours ago. And now, Renard said, turning to the contract, the terms having been agreed upon, the bloodlines having been verified, and the packs having given their consent, I invite Alpha King, Cale Ashenmoor, and my daughter Seraphine Renard to approach the altar and seal their union. Seraphine stepped forward. Her hands had stopped trembling. She had locked them still through sheer will, and Elara recognized the technique because she used it herself every day. Every autopsy, every time her hands wanted to shake, and she would not let them. Kyle didn't move. Renard's smile held. "Alpha King, if you would." "I have a question first," Kyle said. His voice filled the hall the way smoke fills a room, spreading to every corner, impossible to ignore. "The wolves your border patrol has been killing, the Ashenmoor scouts, 7 in the past 2 years alone. Did you order their deaths personally, or did you delegate?" The silence was not the silence of a crowd holding its breath. It was the silence of 300 hearts, stopping simultaneously. Renard's smile did not falter. This was the most impressive thing about him. "I am not sure what you are referring to. I have the autopsy records, detailed ones, performed by a woman who takes very precise notes, and who, unlike you, does not lie." Kyle reached into his coat and produced a file. Elara recognized it. It was her file, her records, the ones she kept in the locked drawer of her desk, the ones that documented every body she had ever processed, including the details she had been instructed to omit. She had not given them to him. She did not know how he had obtained them. He placed the file on the altar next to the mating contract. 7 Ashenmoor wolves, Kyle said. All entered Ironvale territory as scouts, investigating the disappearance of Border Patrol volunteers. All killed by your forces, all autopsied by your pack mortician's assistant, and officially listed as rogues resisting capture. But the actual records, the ones she kept hidden, tell a different story. Entry wounds inconsistent with resistance, restraint marks. 1 wolf was killed while sedated. Your border patrol has been executing prisoners. Renard's smile had become something else now. Not a smile, a fixture, a thing bolted to his face. "These are serious allegations," Renard said. "They are not allegations. They are records, written in the hand of a woman who has spent 9 years among the dead and has never once falsified a report, unlike every other wolf in your chain of command. The woman you are referring to is a nullified Omega, with no standing in this pack. Her records carry no legal weight. Her records carry the weight I choose to give them, and I am Alpha King." Kale turned to Seraphine. For the first time he looked at her directly, and his expression was not cold. It was careful, measured, the expression of a man about to do something that would hurt someone who did not entirely deserve it. "You knew," he said to her, not accusatory, factual. Seraphine's chin did not lower. "I knew my father's methods. I did not choose them. But you agreed to this contract, knowing it was designed to leash me politically while the killings continued. I agreed because my father told me it was the only way to save the pack, and I believed him. Perhaps I was stupid to believe him, but I was not malicious." Kyle nodded. Once. An acknowledgement that was almost in its restraint, a kindness. Then he looked at the contract on the altar. 4 months of negotiation. 4 months of clause and counterclause, of territorial concessions and breeding requirements and political obligations. All of it inked on goatskin parchment in the traditional way, because Ironvale clung to traditions even when the traditions were chains. He did not pick it up. He did not tear it. He turned and looked directly at Elara. 300 wolves turned to follow his gaze, and the background noise that had been Elara her entire life suddenly had 300 pairs of eyes on it, and she felt the weight of every single one like a hand pressing down on her chest. "Come here," Kyle said. Elara could not move. She could not breathe. The hum in her sternum was deafening now. A sound that was not a sound, but a presence, a force, something vast and ancient, pressing against the inside of her ribs like an animal trying to get out. She took a step, then another. The wolves in the back rows parted, not out of respect, but out of instinct, the way water parts around a stone, because something was radiating off her that they could not name, but could feel. The sealed wolf. Waking up. She walked the length of the hall, past the seated wolves, past the candles, past Renard, whose smile had finally, after decades, broken, replaced by something raw and honest and afraid, past Seraphine, who watched her pass with an expression that was not jealousy. It was recognition. One woman seeing another woman walk toward the thing she herself would never have. Ilara climbed the altar steps. Kyle stood before her, close enough to touch. The candles threw his shadow across the stone, enormous and wavering, and his scent wrapped around her like a warm hand, and the bond between them sang at a frequency that made the iron chandeliers above them hum in sympathy. "This is your choice," he said. His voice was low. "For her alone. Not mine. Not the bonds. Yours. If you want to walk away, I will let you go. It will destroy me, but I will let you go. I am not Renard. I do not own what does not choose to be owned. You are asking me to choose between being invisible and starting a war. I am asking you to choose between being invisible and being seen. The war was already coming. Renard ensured that. What I am asking you is whether you want to face it beside me or alone in a basement." She looked at the contract. 4 months of negotiation, the survival of 2 packs, the weight of politics and bloodlines, and centuries of tradition. She looked at the altar candle still burning in its iron holder, and something inside her, something that had been silent for 23 years, something that had been sealed and dormant and buried under formaldehyde and fluorescent lights, and the weight of being told she was nothing that something opened its eyes. Ilara picked up the candle. She held it to the corner of the mating contract. The parchment caught. The goat skin curled. The flame climbed. The smell of it filled the great hall, that sharp tang of singed animal hide, and Ilara held the burning contract by its edge as the fire ate through the clauses, and the terms and the breeding requirements, and the wax from the candle dripped onto her knuckles and burned, and she did not flinch, and 300 wolves watched, and not one of them breathed. She set the burning contract on the altar stone and stepped back. Kyle watched it burn. His amber eyes reflected the flame, and his expression was not surprise, because he had not expected her to do what he wanted. He had expected her to do what she chose. And this was it. Her choice. Her fire. "Well," he said. And for the first time, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just watched his mate burn down the thing standing between them. A sharp, fierce, dangerous smile. "That settles that." Renard moved. Fast, faster than a politician should have been able to move, because underneath the bureaucracy, Renard was still an alpha, and a cornered alpha was the most dangerous thing in any room. He lunged for Ilara, his hand going for her throat, his wolf surging forward so that his eyes flashed silver and his nails elongated into claws. He never reached her. Kyle intercepted him with the casual, devastating efficiency of a man who had been fighting since before he could speak. One hand closed around Renard's wrist, the other caught his throat. The Alpha King of Ashenmore lifted the pack Alpha of Ironvale off the ground with one arm and held him there, feet dangling claws, scratching uselessly at the hand around his throat. "You threaten my mate," Kyle said, and the containment was gone. All of it. His voice was not a voice. It was a frequency, something that travelled through the stone floor and into the bones of every wolf in the hall. His eyes were no longer amber. They were gold. Pure gold. The wolf and the man overlapping, superimposed. You threaten her, in front of me, on hallowed ground. Renard's face was turning purple. His claws drew blood from Kyle's wrist, and Kyle did not notice. Not care. Kyle. Ilara's voice, quiet, steady. The voice of a woman who had spent 9 years keeping her hand still in the presence of death. The gold in his eyes flickered. The grip on Renard's throat loosened. 1 degree. Put him down, she said. He is not worth the blood on sacred ground. He threatened you, and I burned his contract on his own altar. I think we are even. Kyle looked at her. The wolf behind his eyes, the beast he kept, leashed the thing that only she could reach. It looked at her through his eyes, and saw the woman who smelled like rain and white cedar, who had steady hands, who cut open the dead with more care than the living received, and it settled. Not disappeared. Settled, like a fire banked, but not extinguished. He dropped Renard. The pack alpha crumpled to the stone floor, gasping, clutching his throat. Ironvale is hereby under Ashenmoor jurisdiction, Kyle said to the hall at large. His voice was controlled again, but only just the way a dam is controlled. Your alpha has been conducting covert operations against the Wolf Throne, including the murder of Ashenmoor scouts on your soil. His authority is forfeit. Any wolf who wishes to contest this may do so now. No one moved. Additionally, Kyle turned to Ilara. In front of 300 wolves. In front of Renard still gasping on the floor. In front of Seraphine, who stood by the altar with her white dress glowing in the candlelight, watching with dry eyes and a straight spine. This woman is Ilara, daughter of Ilara Ashenmoor, blood-born of the Moon Court. She carries the seal. She is my fated mate, and if any wolf in any pack, on any territory, raises a hand or a voice against her, from this moment forward, they will answer to me, personally. The word personally echoed off the vaulted ceiling, and every wolf in the hall understood exactly what it meant. Ilara stood on the altar steps, with the burned remnants of the contract still smoking beside her, and the hum in her chest was no longer a hum. It was a howl. Her wolf, sealed for 23 years, was pressing against the barrier, and the barrier was cracking, and she could feel it the way you feel, ice breaking beneath your feet, that terrifying, exhilarating fracture. Kyle, she whispered, something is happening. He was beside her instantly, his hand on her back, his scent surrounding her. Let her come, he said. Do not fight it. Let her come. The seal broke. It was not gentle. It was not a slow awakening. It was a dam bursting 23 years of suppression releasing in a single catastrophic moment, and Ilara's body arched, and her vision whited out, and a sound tore from her throat that was not human. Not wolf, something older. Something that predated both, and the candles in the iron chandeliers above her blew out simultaneously, all 100 of them. And the great hall plunged into darkness. In the darkness, light. Silver light. Pouring from Ilara's skin, from her hands, her face, her chest, the birthmark on her hip, all of it glowing with a luminescence that was not fire and not moonlight, but something between something that cast no shadows, that illuminated everything evenly, that revealed the hall and its 300 wolves in a light so clear and so pure that every face was readable, every expression exposed. Ilara's wolf was not a wolf, or rather, She was not only a wolf, she was what the old texts called a moon singer, a wolf so deeply connected to the original bloodline that her shift produced not fur and claws but light, pure lunar energy, the kind of wolf that had not been seen in 6 generations. The light faded, slowly, like a dawn in reverse. Elara was on her knees on the altar steps, gasping, shaking her skin still faintly luminous, her eyes, when she opened them, no longer brown. Silver. Her eyes were silver. Kyle was kneeling beside her, both hands on her shoulders, his face inches from hers, and his expression was something she had never seen on a face before. Awe. Not the performed kind, the real kind, the kind that makes you forget to breathe. "There you are," he said. Not to her, to the wolf inside her, to the thing that had been sleeping for 23 years and had just woken up and announced itself to an entire hall of witnesses. "I have been waiting for you." In the front row, Damon Renard sat with his father's blood on his sleeve from helping Renard off the floor, and he stared at Elara's silver eyes, and his face was not angry or afraid or contemptuous. It was the face of a man who has just realized that the person he spent years tormenting was something he could never be, and the realization does not make him sorry, but makes him very, very tired. He looked down at his hands. He did not look up again. The events that followed moved quickly. Renard was placed under Ashenmore guard. His beta, a practical woman named Elara, had processed the body of her mate 3 years ago, and whose name was Gretchen, assumed interim leadership of Ironvale by unanimous consent. She was a short, square woman with a voice like gravel and a reputation for competence so thorough that it bordered on the supernatural, and her first act was to open the eastern outpost and recall the 4 wolves stationed there, because, as she put it, nobody should be that alone for that long. Seraphine requested a private audience with Kale. It was granted. What they said to each other, no one else knew. But when Seraphine emerged, her eyes were red, and her spine was straight, and she walked directly to Gretchen and said, "I want to learn how to run something, not as a bride, as a beta." Gretchen looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "Can you get up at 5 in the morning? I can learn." "Good enough." Mattis was found in his quarters, sitting in his reading chair with a glass of whiskey, listening to the commotion above him through the pipes. When Elara came to him, silver-eyed and shaking, he put the glass down and said, "I always wondered what you would look like when you woke up. Were you afraid I would not? Every day. For 23 years. Every single day." She hugged him. He smelled of pipe tobacco and cedar shavings and whiskey, and he was the closest thing to a father she had ever had, and his arms around her were thin and old and shaking. "She looked like you," he said. "Your mother. Exactly like you. Except she never got to see the silver. She would have been so proud." The claiming ceremony was held at dawn, not in the Great Hall. Kyle would not do it there. He said the hall smelled of politics and fear, and neither had any place in a claiming. Instead, they went to the Eastern Garden, the one with the wisteria arch, the one where they had walked, the one where Kale had knelt in the dirt to look at a birthmark on a mortician's hip. The wisteria was blooming. The purple flowers hung in heavy clusters, releasing a scent so thick and sweet that it competed with the wood smoke and rain that surrounded both of them like a shared atmosphere. Mattis stood witness. Gretchen stood witness. Kyle's 2 guards stood witness. No one else. The dawn light came through the garden in long golden shafts, catching the dew on the wisteria, turning each droplet into a small fire. "This is not a contract," Kyle said. "There is nothing to sign, nothing to negotiate. This is a claiming. It requires only two things, consent and a mark." "I consent," Ilara said. "I was not finished. You were about to ask if I was sure." "I was. I am sure. I have been sure since you knelt in the dirt for me. No one has ever knelt for me, not once in 23 years. You are an Alpha King, and you knelt, and that told me more about who you are than any contract ever could." Kyle stepped forward. His hands came up to her face, and this time they touched. His palms against her cheeks, warm and rough, the calluses catching against her skin. He tilted her head to expose the curve of her neck, the junction where throat met shoulder, the place where the claiming mark would go. "This will hurt," he said. "I have been hurt before. This is different." "How? This one I choose." He kissed her then. Not on the mouth, on the spot where the mark would go. A press of lips against skin, warm and deliberate, and Ilara's silver eyes closed, and her hands found his chest, and the hum between them became a single note, one note held by two instruments in perfect unison. Then his teeth. The shift was partial, just his canines elongating, sharpening, and the bite was swift and deep, and it did hurt, a white-hot point of pain that radiated outward like a stone dropped in still water. And then the pain became something else, something warm and vast and connective, and Ilara gasped because she could feel him. Not his body, his everything. His grief for his mother, his rage at Renard, his 6 years of silence from a wolf who had stopped speaking, his loneliness, which was so enormous and so carefully hidden that it took her breath away, because the Alpha King of Ashenmoor, the most feared wolf on the continent, had been just as alone as she had. He pulled back, blood on his lips. Her blood mixed. His eyes were gold again, the wolf present watching. "Ilara Ashenmoor," he said. "Moonsinger. My mate. My queen." "Kyle Ashenmoor," she said. "Man who kneels in dirt. My mate. My king." Mattis blew his nose loudly into a handkerchief that smelled of pipe tobacco. Gretchen pretended not to notice. The garden held them in its wisteria-scented light, and the dawn continued to rise, and somewhere in the basement of the pack house, the fluorescent lights in the tile room buzzed over an empty autopsy table, and the formaldehyde sat unused in its cabinet, and the clipboard hung on its nail, and the careful handwriting in the logbook ended mid-page with the date of the last entry, and nothing after. 2 weeks later, Ilara returned to the morgue one final time. Not to work, to collect her things. There were not many. The library books she had never returned. A sweater Mattis had knitted her badly 3 winters ago, lumpy and oversized, and the color of moss. A photograph of a woman she had never met, found in her mother's file, with the same dark hair, the same steady hands, visible even in a photograph, the same mouth that did not smile easily, but smiled honestly. She stood in the tile room. The fluorescent light buzzed. The ventilation recycled its lemon-scented air. The table was clean. The drawers were organized. Everything was exactly as she had left it. She pulled off the iron pendant and hung it on the nail where her clipboard used to be. The crescent moon and 3 lines caught the fluorescent light spinning slowly on its leather cord. A footstep behind her. Not Mattis. Heavier. The scent of wood smoke and iron and deep green moss. Kyle stood in the doorway of the tile room, too large for the frame, his dark hair nearly brushing the top of the door. He looked at the room. The table. The lights. The cabinet of tools. The drain in the center of the floor. "This is where you lived," he said. "This is where I survived. There is a difference." He nodded. He had told her something similar in the garden about dormant and absent. He understood the taxonomy of endurance. "Are you ready to leave?" he asked. She looked at the pendant spinning slowly on its nail. The dead rogue wolf's pendant. The mark of the bloodline she had carried in secret her entire life, the bloodline that connected her to a mother she had never known, a pack she had never joined, and a king she had never expected. "Yes," she said. She walked through the door. Kyle's hand found the small of her back warm through the fabric of her shirt, and the hum between them settled into its steady rhythm, that second heartbeat, that proof of something the world had tried to bury and failed. They climbed the stairs out of the basement. The late afternoon sun hit them at the top, bright and warm and smelling of wisteria from the garden, and Elara squinted against it, because her eyes were still adjusting. She had spent 9 years underground. It was going to take a while to get used to the light. Behind her, the fluorescent light in the tile room buzzed, once flickered and went dark.